Hello, welcome back to 375 Alive. I'm Ryan Speaks Geek.
And I'm David the Dead.
We're going to be doing a little segment which is toy versus collectible. And you can probably guess by seeing them on here and also what the title of the video will probably end up being. So we are looking at the N1, the Mandalorian N1 today. You've got the vintage collection. I've got the Epic series.
I do like it.
It's good, isn't it?
It's good, yeah.
And it was so cheap. Even retail, I think it's about
how
30.
much was it, Ryan?
I think about 30 quid.
30 quid.
New. I think I even got it cheaper than that. This is the thing, like, so one of the things we often talk about between ourselves is the difference about, like, the fact that toys now from Hasbro for the vintage collection are more like collector pieces that have features, and I wouldn't say they were massively like toys, because like the toys we played with as a kid, when you look at the Kenner line, for example, had things like lights, sounds, firing missiles.
Well, yeah, they did. They had it all, didn't they, with the electronics. They weren't necessarily completely to scale, were they? Like the X-Wing is, but it's a toy. It's
Like the Falcon, another big one. Which we'll look at some point, which is like the 90s / Kenner one as well, which is obviously the 90s one, just a repaint of the original one. And the big MF, we will have a look at those at some point together as well. Scaling obviously is always a big thing for a lot of collectors nowadays.
Yeah, I mean, it's about, we've come so far, technology has gone so far that you kind of want those realistic depictions, especially of the ships now. Like, you can get so close, you can, everything can be digitally scanned, can't it? So you can get, I mean, everything's slightly scaled down, obviously, still fit inside a box and be able to retail for X amount of dollars. You can see why there's two scales here. Well, a kid-friendly one and a more collectible line. I
suppose that's one of the first things we suggest, really. The Epic series, which is now called the Epic World of Action series. I think you got a slight rename, rebrand. It was Epic Hero series, sorry, and now it's Epic World of Action. Is a 4-inch scale.
Yes.
So it is a little bit bigger than 3 3/4 inch. So yeah, this is the Mandalorian that came with the fighter, and in my fighter.
Oh, I haven't tried this. Does this just come off?
It slides forward.
It slides forward. Oh, that's the nice.
Just like the show. So that slides forward, and this is the retro collection Mando. So obviously a bit of a difference there.
Yeah.
And then if we look at the, if you don't mind me manhandling your expensive collectible, also slide forward.
It does.
Look at that, just like my one. Although it's a bit of a tighter fit to get the figure out, though, isn't it? Just throwing that out there. So
actually, there's not a lot of headroom in that cockpit at all. You go for all this accuracy, and then you'll probably find he'll have a harder time standing than these two as well because of the amount of articulation. Oh, look at that. Yeah. Actually, he doesn't scale too badly with the vintage collection.
So yeah, with the because there is a bit more articulation, and especially some of the newer series ones, there's a bit of knee articulation and a bit of elbow, but not as much as a vintage collection, but also a bit more than a standard. So this one is the 5 POA. It's got like a rubber cape that just slides off the side, which is really nice.
Yeah.
Obviously the retro one has the cloth goods, but if I just quickly take this off, he said as if it was easy. There it is. These actually work really nicely on these figures because they just, where it is just that rubber, it just sits around.
Yeah.
It works really good on it. It actually works really nicely on troopers. I found out, like some of the vintage collection troopers. So especially if you're doing like the mud, the troopers from the mud on Mimban from Solo, really good.
Nice.
So the vehicle differences. Obviously, there's a size difference. I'll just slide it through there because I can. As you can see, definitely a size difference.
There is, yeah. Do you want to move this over so you can? Yeah, I mean, yes, It's only when you put them side by side that you're going to notice that big a difference. But if this had come out maybe in anything up to maybe the Revenge of the Sith line, I say Revenge of the Sith, it's topical, 20th anniversary. So anything up to, like, not including the last 20 years, people probably would have accepted that as the ship from the toy
Yes.
line. Maybe it's a little underscaled than the Phantom Menace N1.
Yes, it is small. It is definitely. I don't have one to hand. but
Maybe only by
yeah.
the wingspan, I would have thought, though.
Wingspan and body a bit.
Oh, really?
A bit. But one interesting, when it comes packed in, it's packed in the box. This bit actually just very nicely unplugs. So when it plugs back in, it works really well, and that's what gives it the impressive sort of length there.
Well, that's a nice play feature as well, obviously, because kids are going to throw these things about. So
Yeah. It's
had the
and
sharp, pointy bit
rubbery.
as rubbery and detachable was probably a good
as are these bits. So one of the big differences here is that mine has firing missiles. Does yours?
Oh, I didn't realise we had to research this. No, it doesn't have firing missiles. It does have the the thing that they use to prop up the trash compactor. Comes as a little Easter egg. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I do. I was just really enjoying I was seeing how many doo-wops, doohickeys, thingamajigs,
yeah.
all we're going to be.
I haven't slept much, Ryan.
Yeah, neither have I. I work in finance and it's tax
so
year-end.
it doesn't yet. Play features, no, not much. There's obviously a lot of detail. It comes with its own stand. Anyone that's got this knows. So obviously you've got this
I do
stand.
like that a lot.
You've got another stand which allows it to sort of have that sort of floating, sort of stationary floating sort of motion. It has a removable sort of side cockpit bit for the droid slot, which is cool. Yeah, it kind of does what you need it to do as a collectible, but yeah, as play features, I guess missiles. I never really missed out on missiles as a kid, but maybe that's just me, or maybe missiles weren't a. No, I did use missiles. I had an Ultra Magnus as a kid, and I remember him having pretty good missiles. So yeah, they're not Nerf bullets either.
They're not Nerf
that's
bullets.
a bonus.
So I haven't got them in because not because I fired them and lost them, which I would absolutely expect anyone to expect me to do, because I've packed them away for the moment. But they're like see-through green, they're translucent green, and they do look pretty cool actually when they're in there. But as you can see, it looks just as good without. And to be honest, I'm sure someone could, if they wanted to, 3D print some just more Canon looking things to go into the ends.
I like the fact that they would be green though, actually like representing the lasers.
Firing lasers.
Yeah. Easier to find when you drop them on a grey carpet as well.
Yes, absolutely. Another cool play feature is the engines. So they spin round.
This is my first time seeing one up close, and that's really cool.
These pop out a bit more, and it's like translucent blue through here and there. So it's got.
Nope.
Oh, yeah. So that's just my one.
Wow.
So I think that's a really cool feature. It really changes the look of it.
Yeah.
And it's just such a simple mechanism. It is literally just 2 tabs.
Yeah.
Done. Changes it. Looks really cool. Both of ours have the dome. Mine does not facilitate a astromech droid. So you can see the point there.
Yeah, but then they don't have the astromech in the line anyway, do they? So
not yet.
You wouldn't be swapping him out.
You never know. There's a lot going on. It's a simple hinge that you just push in. Works really well. The Grogu that comes with it's very reminiscent of the Retro Collection one, but obviously scale wise that is done for it's a playability scale rather than it's small, but it's not so small you're going to lose it. Whereas, if you don't mind me saying so, the vintage one, whilst I think looks amazing and it's impressive, they've got so much detail in such a small figure.
There's so much you could lose.
But yeah, I'm even hesitant to say, do you want to get him out, because I'm worried that you're going to lose him.
Well, I'm not. It's not only that, but I'm sure I'm not alone in that. When I got this, I set it up, maybe played with it for half an hour, stuck it on a shelf, and it's kind of been there ever since. So, playability features, that I'm sure they exist, but us collectors like to display rather than play.
So if you put him in this one, he just disappears completely. But yeah, obviously way more detailed. The good thing about these ones, though, they are sort of, again, a bit like the retro one. They are articulated. They don't have the little ball joint thing, and the head is 3 points of articulation.
Well, let's talk about the retro collection of it all then, because we've got the vintage collection, which is an adult line. We've got this epic world of, I want to say adventures, action, which is obviously the kid-friendly line. Where does that leave the retro collection? in terms of like finding an audience. I know we're getting more of these 6-packs with the A New Hope, which is great from an adult point of view, but are they missing a trick, or is retro now going to suffer because we've got this? It's a rival line, really, isn't it?
I don't think it will, mainly because they seem to be predominantly doing newer properties with this line. So, you know, we are getting the Mandalorian figures, obviously. There's also Skeleton Crew figures coming in this line, which probably isn't going to be in the retro.
Or vintage at the moment.
Or vintage at the moment. Exclusively Black Series. So, I mean, look, it sits really nicely in there. That's the Epic World Series one. I think as well, like scaling wise, because of the way they are fairly basic in their design, they do fit in nicely with the retro collection, but it really does depend on the character. Yeah. So, you know, I think it complements it well when it's the Mandalorians or anything in armor, because I actually think the retro Mando is a bit undersized, if I'm being honest.
Well, when you put all three of them side by side, I agree.
Yeah, and I think you know, I think the Armourer and Bo-Katan are a better sort of scale, but I think his is a little bit underscale. But again, it's retro. You're very forgiving in the retro world and vintage world. So the Epic World series works really well when it's like the Dark Trooper that's just coming out, SM-33, you know, the aliens as well, like Captain Brutus. Yeah. So I think that works really well. And I've actually got the Moff Gideon in his armour, and that looks incredible with all the retro figures. Like, it scales perfectly because it is that little bit bigger. And Paz Vizsla obviously being the bigger Mandalorian character.
Expect him to be bigger as well,
and with the blockier colours, beautifully fits in. So
as like a retro and sort of more basic point of articulation sort of collector, which I think that's fair to say.
Yeah.
I say it like it's not a bad thing. Like, they're very just different.
It's just a different way of life.
Yeah, and I say I love the original Kenner figures. So yeah, with that in mind, so you obviously have quite a big retro collection. So this complements your retro collection really.
Yeah, I like to think of it as retro
them
plus.
Together. Yeah.
They've even got like a new Scout Trooper coming out, which looks fairly vintagey, but it has knee articulation. And when I say knee articulation, I don't mean ball joints, whatever. I mean a hinge. But it means when it sits, it comes with the speeder bike. And the other thing is affordability. Like, these figures are like £6-7 when they come out.
Yeah, so pocket money figures, aren't they?
Yeah. And like the first vehicle we get in the line, and it's £30 maybe, you know, when it comes out. And I've seen them going for cheaper some places. But the retail prices on them, they are under a different area of Hasbro. So, like, for example, Mr. Stevie doesn't deal...
Different budget, different, completely separate,
Exactly. They don't take into account, I think, what the Epic World is doing with vintage and... No, I believe when we spoke to Steve when he was on us, I think he said, you know, not his wheelhouse. Like, it's a very separate thing.
Okay, interesting.
That is more like a separate department which focuses on kid toys, effectively. That's, again, that definition between the two things now.
I'd be surprised if they went head to head though. If Retro Collection put out a wave of figures and Epic World of series put out the same
Retro
6,
Plus.
Retro put out the same 6 figures. Their heads would roll at Hasbro, surely.
Yeah, I would imagine. But you know, there really has been some crossover. You get your standard Duff Airs. You've also got just some fun, like, play completely made up for the toy line things, like these mech suits for the Stormtrooper, Vader, and Mando, which are insane. But I kind of love them, and I think I'll pick them up because again, they're not very much.
No,
you know, it's something fun, and it also feels like this is the kind of toy you go into a toy store and buy. Whereas I feel like this, I do have to pre-order on the internet from Hasbro Pulse, or you know.
Well, yeah, I get, and this comes to the sort of FOMO and anxiety of toy collecting in general, isn't it? Because like you see an item like this, it's a premium item, so you have to weigh up whether you can afford to not just collect the line, but collect like pieces like this. And this isn't even one of the more expensive ones out there. I'm talking like HasLabs and things like that. But also, if you're pre-ordering it, you have to pre-order it. Are you gonna, it's not going to be so limited that if you don't get it there and then, like
you're screwed.
it makes the collecting side of it not as fun.
Yeah.
Whereas this side brings the fun back in. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like you could go into a toy store or a supermarket, or online, and they're gonna be fairly plentiful because they can afford to make them at in volume and say within budget for a lot of people. So if this hadn't been released in the vintage collection, I probably would have paid more attention to this on its release, because I've got plenty of underscale. The U-wing is underscaled. Like,
yes.
It's no different really. It's just in a.
I've seen in one of Dave's latest videos.
yeah, check it out. So they definitely have their place without a doubt. For me, if they were releasing things that weren't available in the vintage or retro, I'd consider picking them up. And like you reeled off quite a few characters that haven't been released in the vintage collection. So yeah, I can see a few people doing some sort of placeholders until we get the fully articulated 3.75 release.
I think the Dark Troopers and Army Builder, that's going to be hard to find, weirdly, because I think adults will go out and buy it and stop the kids from getting it. And I'm including myself in that, because that's a really good mix. It's got, again, I think that's got the 7 points of articulation, which is where it's got elbows and knees. But again, looks really good. It's 4-inch, and obviously it's a bigger character. So there is also army building capabilities in that, and also it is much cheaper to go and get 4 $7.99 figures for a mini army than it is for $16.99. I mean, the first Dark Trooper thing they did was actually a deluxe, and it came with the charging station, which, to be fair, I will say, I actually thought that was one of the few deluxes where I was like, I like that, makes sense. There's a diorama piece, and it connected, and if you did buy multiple, you could make that corridor scene. It's not like they just gave him like an extra gun and were like, yeah, deluxe.
No, absolutely, yeah. It's a deluxe package all round. I don't think it sold particularly well, or if it did, they made way more than they anticipated, because you can buy it, or you could pick it up recently for less than what the single carded figure
I think at the moment,
going for now.
When I looked online earlier, just out of interest, it was about 20 quid, including poster packaging, for the deluxe.
Okay, so less than it would have retailed at originally, but still...
it's a good enough price, but they were clearanced at a few places, I think, at one point for like a tenner.
I only picked one up behind you there, partly because he doesn't show up that well on my displays. I've obviously got the black corridors back there, but
he does. See, so I would actually argue
Mando then.
Yeah. So I would also argue that he looks underscaled compared to your vintage collection.
I think he is underscaled, yeah, and the plastic's slightly rubbery. He's got the gimmick of the sort of light shining through.
Light piping.
Which is cool, but it's also, that's a kid feature, that's a toy feature. They are toys, but yeah. That's something I would like to see on the Epic series.
Yeah, and I could see that happening, to be fair. But so I think it's a really good line. I think out of the two, it's absolutely about what you're preferring. If you're preferring that sort of retro Kenner kind of toy aesthetic, and this is a really nice budget-friendly, fun option with play features, and it's like they're compatible with the retro collection, because, like I said, the retro figure, which is what I've been having in mind, that's actually the Epic World Grogu, but the vintage one the retro one works in there really well.
Yeah.
But you put the retro Mando in it, and it looks good. It looks like it's actually got some room to move in the cockpit without being too loose.
No.
So it works well in that respect. So if you did have your retro collection figures around it, it wouldn't look out of place. I think if you're going for your serious articulated dioramas, that's the investment. And that's, I think, it's an investment into making a big display and a show. I think they've gone the right way with these display stands. I would wish that this had like maybe a flip down foot or something. Just maybe that would be my only thing.
Landing gear might have helped.
Even as a toy, as a kid playing with it, the X-wing had like some landing gear. Obviously, TIE Fighter doesn't need any, but most vehicles had landing gear still, and that's the one thing I think is maybe slightly missing from it. But again, you're very forgiving because you only spent £30 on it.
Yeah.
And the firing missiles, I'm still a sucker. I still effectively play with my toys. I like setting up the scenes, but I like to play.
There's still a lot of detail that goes into that, for the ship that it is. Like,
there's even some weathering.
Yeah.
On the
the actual stripes. Sort of grey, sort of silveryness of both vehicles. It doesn't. I mean, possibly not the best lighting in here, but from this angle, you can't tell a whole lot of difference. Yes, there is a little bit of weathering, but we know even in the vintage collection, they don't weather ships up like they used to anymore. So, Yeah.
Back in our day.
Back in our day.
Yeah, so I don't think there's like, I think with this thing, you know, it's always an argument that's had about like toy versus collectible. I don't think there's a clear winner or anything. I don't even think it's really that much of a competition. I think it is purely about your collecting choices, what you want it for. Because if I put, let's just argument's sake, put one last thing before we wrap it up. But if we try and get retro Mando in there, actually, without the knee articulation, it just doesn't.
We are not backwards compatible then.
No.
Wow, that's...
Unless can you take the engine block off and...
You can, but it's a tight fit.
I mean, there are easier ways to steal my figure, Dave. Rather than putting in a cockpit I'll never get it out of.
Yeah, see you later.
Yeah. Tune in next week and Ryan tries to reclaim his stuff. So as you can see, it doesn't really work in that respect, which is... That was actually really surprising for me just then. I really thought that was going to slide in like a dream.
But then going back to the U-Wing, and I'll do another plug for that video, but, you know, that's a severely undersized vehicle. That's you're supposed to be able to fit 2 characters at least in the cockpit, and you can't.
Which wouldn't look out of place with the X-Wing, the vintage X-Wing pilot in. So I will pick up one of those for my vintage fleet.
The Falcon that came with in the Solo movie, so the Force Link 2.0, you couldn't fit more than 1 character in the cockpit. So they've slowly been moving the 3 3/4 inch line, apart from the super articulated vintage collection. They've kind of been moving that to a more kid-friendly line anyway. You had the sort of 2.5 inch figures, didn't you? More recently, and there's been various iterations
Mission Fleet, I think.
Mission Fleet, and there's been sort of different sort of scales. This is the closest one that bridges the gap between like a kid line and then the adult collector line. You could see someone growing up with this and then moving into the vintage collection, or not. I'm just sticking with the sort of toy aesthetic. But I think it helps seeing that same scale sort of from this to this.
And I think also helps from a kid perspective is that actually they do Spider-Man in this scale. The epic world of action is not just Star Wars,
we've got
Marvel, at least Marvel, and there are others, I'm almost certain, I can't think of what they are. But if you wanted to have Iron Man versus the Mandalorian, you could, which is as what you do as kids when you play. You know, you make your own stories and worlds. So
I was one of those boring kids that only liked figures in the same scale. So that would have suited me just fine. They could all go off on their 3 3/4 inch or 4 inch adventures, and So so there is a Marvel adjacent line of this, and I don't know how many other properties they've got that might get the 4 inch treatment, but
I would have said Power Rangers, but obviously now they've marketed that out to Playmates. So and they've got their Power Ranger line coming up, which looks amazing, by the way.
Yeah.
So that's really sort of the end of our debate. No clear winners, but I think that's maybe the lesson and the takeaway from it. It's not about the winning, but it's interesting to see the differences between the two, because I don't see many videos or conversations or pictures where people have both.
No, you're right. I'm not gonna say one's better than the other. I know what I collect, but again, I impose these rules on me that stops me going into other lines. But yeah, I think it's the best kid-friendly line they've done for Star Wars in a very, very long time. Since they sort of really separated the 3 3/4 inch into an adult collector line. It's good to get something that scale back on the shelves and sort of that isn't the retro collection.
Agreed. Well, that's all we got time for today. But until then, keep 375 alive, or in rare occasions, also keep 4 inch alive. So on some occasions, but mainly keep 375 alive. Bye.